Today, I welcome the Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Honorable Scott Turner, a Big Ten champion in a previous life. Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for being here to discuss HUD's Fiscal Year 2026 budget request. I also want to thank you for your visit recently to my district in April. It was great to have you on the ground to see the impact of HUD programs in my district. And let me add, we caught a Razorback baseball game while we were there, and in a shameless plug, I'll give my Razorbacks some credit for making it to Omaha, where they will play Saturday evening against those Bengal Tigers of LSU. It is this committee's responsibility to complete our work on time. I believe we can achieve this goal, and I'm pleased that under Chairman Cole's leadership, we've already begun marking up 12 appropriation bills for FY26. At the same time, it's our expectation that the departments under our jurisdiction spend the funds consistently with the way we appropriate them. We appreciate your partnership as you continue to fully implement the funds Congress made available to HUD for fiscal 25. HUD's request for new budget authority in fiscal 26 is $33.2 billion. That is a $35.5 billion decrease. Let me say that again. That's not a typo. $35.5 billion decrease from the FY25 enacted. HUD also uses mortgage guarantee fees from the Federal Housing Administration and Government National Mortgage Association to offset its spending. The Congressional Budget Office estimates $6.9 billion in offsetting receipts for FY26. That's $1.5 billion less than receipts in 25. Regardless of what the administration sent over in its budget request, the CBO score is what we have to live with, which means we're in an even deeper hole than the president's budget would suggest. To state the obvious, this is a significant reduction in the discretionary budget authority for the department. Mr. Secretary, you heard in April, in my district, many Arkansans are struggling to afford the rising cost of housing. Of course, it's not unique to Northwest Arkansas. The Census Bureau's American Community Survey found that 31% of American households were cost-burdened due to rising housing costs in 23, including 27% of households with a mortgage and 50% of households with rent. This is why HUD's impact is felt in every district. Through its rental assistance programs, HUD ensures that the poor, veterans, the elderly, and those with disabilities can live with dignity. It provides economic development dollars for local governments. It helps fight home-based hazards and provides a hand up for communities recovering from disasters. Because of your department's important mission, Secretary Turner, I'm deeply concerned about the deep cuts the administration's budget makes to HUD. These proposed cuts would radically affect HUD's mission and operations. I'm interested in hearing how a $27.6 billion reduction to HUD's rental assistance programs will help HUD serve our nation's most vulnerable. Your proposal is light on details on how the formula for your proposed state rental assistance program will ultimately work. I'm also curious how HUD will support community development in low and moderate income communities when some of its most important and popular programs, like community development block grants, have been zeroed out. These programmatic changes need to go through the authorizing committees, particularly the proposals to block grant assistance to the states and the dramatic changes on how we combat homelessness in America. These ambitious proposals require an all-in effort. I welcome ongoing dialogue with our authorizing colleagues. HUD's program should work better for the American people. You and I have discussed how there is fat to cut at HUD, but if we cut too deep and if we cut too fast, HUD's programs will not serve the communities you and I have pledged to help. I look forward to learning about your goals for HUD for this upcoming fiscal year and beyond. This subcommittee stands ready to work with you to better serve all Americans as we write this year's THUD bill. I'd now like to recognize the ranking member and my partner in this effort, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. I think we can all agree that housing is a basic human need and serves as a foundation for education, health, and financial outcomes for nearly every family in America. and where you live matters. Without a safe and stable place to live, it is difficult for families to improve educational outcomes, maintain good health, or increase their earnings and build wealth. Across the country, more than 771,000 people are experiencing homelessness, and 75% of low-income renters spend more than half of their income on rent. According to the Census Bureau, last year, the annual cost of renting grew faster, 3.8%, than home values, 1.8%, for the first time since 2011. This comes at a time when more than 56% of African Americans' households and 53% of Hispanic households pay more than 30% of their income on rent, compared to less than 47% of white Americans. Meanwhile, because of existing budget constraints, only 1 in 5 families can receive federal rental assistance. Despite these disparate realities, your department's 2026 budget request proposes to cut HUD funding by more than half. This is not only unacceptable, but unrealistic given the dire need to lower the cost of living for Americans. Mr. Secretary, your budget proposes to eliminate Section 8, public housing, housing for the elderly, housing for persons with disabilities, housing for persons with AIDS, HIV, and the continuum of care programs. Instead, you are proposing to establish a so-called state rental assistance program to block grant rent payments via a formula you have yet to define. Your budget also proposes to eliminate nearly all of HUD's housing construction, supply, and preservation programs. Time does not permit me to enumerate all of them. These so-called reforms would shift HUD program costs onto low-income residents, and I have yet to see from your budget evidence that funding that we could save in these time limits and work requirements if they become law. This doesn't help families who already are working multiple jobs to become self-sufficient. Instead, it creates chaos, financial uncertainty, and pushes these families into more severe trade-offs. A choice of feeding your family, paying for medications, or paying rent. Lastly, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the cuts to fair housing enforcement and your attempts to deregulate long-standing civil rights law. Mr. Secretary, let's remember the long and painful history that led to the creation of the fair housing law. The Federal Housing Administration, banks, and insurance companies literally drew red lines on maps around the neighborhoods where they refused to provide home loans and insurance to otherwise qualified home buyers. I know. I was born in one of them, and I currently live in one of them. This discrimination extended to black veterans returning from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. These men and women had served their country, yet were excluded from the GI Bill's housing benefits that were transformational for white families. Black veterans were denied VA-backed loans. Of the first 3,350 VA home loans in Mississippi, only 2 went to blacks. Not 2%, 2 out of 3,350. Not even fighting for our country abroad earned blacks a fair shot at the American dream here at home. Black families were denied the primary path to building generational wealth, and that created a racial wealth gap that persists to this day. I know this as well. I serve on 2 of the boards of the predecessor banks to what is now Bank of America. I chaired the Community Reinvestment Act Committee, and I served on the Audit Committee. I led the investigations into my own bank for its discrimination. The Fair Housing Law of 1968 represents a simple but crucial promise that every American would have an equal opportunity to secure safe, decent housing. Unfortunately, since the start of this administration, we have seen an attack on long-standing laws that were enacted to stop excluding blacks from the greatnesses of this country. The current state of housing and the cost of living in America calls on us to question our national priorities. Unfortunately, Mr. Secretary, this budget proposal ignores far too many realities, and it is not a reflection of what should be the values of our country. It is an exploitation of our most vulnerable. Mr. Chairman, I implore my colleagues on this panel to work together to find some real solutions to the housing crisis and drive down the cost of living, not increase the economic burdens on every American. And I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Before I introduce our witness this morning, the chair recognizes a very familiar face on the front row in the HUD staff, Graydon Dalbert, former staffer for this subcommittee. Mr. Secretary, you got a really good one there.
Indeed, sir.
But stop the poaching.
It's a team. We're all one team.
He's a good man and a valuable asset, and I know you'll enjoy his service to your organization. At this time, I'm going to recognize you for your opening statement. The entire prepared statement will be included in the record.
Yes.
But we're going to give you 5 minutes to briefly summarize your comments.
Yes, sir.
And then we'll open our question and answer period. And with that, Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you, Chairman Womack, Vice Chair Bice, and Ranking Member Clyburn, and all the distinguished members of this subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today in support of President Trump's 2026 budget for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And again, thank you, Chairman Womack, for having me in Arkansas and showing me innovative housing solutions there in your district in April. Members, we have a small window of opportunity to help every American achieve the dream of home ownership. And the clock is indeed ticking. As of this past April, the national median home price is $414,000, up from more than $341,000 in April of 2021. And this is a dramatic increase of more than 21%. It became very hard for Americans to afford homes due to the policies of the Biden administration, which have been marked by negligence and a lack of stewardship of American taxpayer dollars. We cannot keep running the same plays that are causing Americans to lose. It's time to run new plays and get a new playbook. And this budget, the president's fiscal year 2026, is indeed that new playbook. It requests $43.5 billion for the Department of Housing and Urban Development to fund critical programs and provide greater fiscal responsibility and restraint. It carries out President Trump's day one directive to increase housing supply and make it affordable again. This budget supports HUD's mission, and we will indeed maximize the funds Congress, you and your colleagues provide to us, no matter what the amount, be it $10 billion or $10. We have been taking inventory of every program and found HUD's rental assistance to be full of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's broken and deviated from its original purpose, which is to temporarily help Americans in need. HUD assistance is not supposed to be permanent. It should be a trampoline, not a hammock, not a resting place. It's supposed to be like a treadway, which is a military bridge, which is used temporarily to get over obstacles, and then it is removed. We're also eliminating radical political agendas and wasteful spending at HUD. We identified, as an example, $260 million in savings for taxpayers. We canceled $4 million in DEI contracts that had nothing to do with HUD and recovered an additional $1.9 billion from inactive contracts that should have been closed out during the Biden administration. We've seen that pouring money into programs just fuels its existing status, which is not good. No, here we are, reversing course to be efficient and effective, not bloated and bureaucratic. We want to be efficient and effective, not bloated and bureaucratic. We're also undoing harmful regulations, including the Obama-Biden era, affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, which effectively turned HUD into a national zoning board. We're cutting red tape, and that is important, but we're also increasing the housing stock and opportunities for first-time homebuyers. The Federal Housing Administration, FHA, which insures mortgages on more than 7 million homes, has insured mortgages for more than 140,000 first-time homebuyers since January, when President Trump returned to the White House. In addition, we're ending taxpayer-funded subsidies for HUD programs for illegal aliens entering in our country. But HUD is more than just housing. We streamlined the disaster recovery process to help funding to get to communities more quickly and efficiently. For our tribal communities, we announced $2.2 million under the expansion of the Tribal HUD VASH program to address veteran homelessness. And for our rural communities, we have convened roundtables in states around the country and discussed solutions for workforce housing, returning HUD to its intended purpose, serving Americans through localized solutions. The president's budget continues this approach by limiting the size and the spending of federal programs. It proposes a state-based formula grant to encourage states to have skin in the game for the funding and design of their own rental assistance. The block grant will empower states to be more thoughtful and precise in their stewardship. HUD has currently 30,000 program awardees and recipients. No wonder the system is plagued by abuse. Empowering states through this reimagined system would prune the administrative burden and maintain necessary assistance for the elderly and the abused. The budget also continues our commitment to promote economic independence and adopt compassionate common sense, and historically a bipartisan conversation around reforms like time limits and work limits, so to encourage able-bodied residents to move up and get out of assisted housing. It addresses our nation's homelessness crisis by returning solutions to the local authorities. The president's budget saves billions of taxpayer dollars and helps restore fiscal responsibility. And Mr. Chairman, in order to properly serve the American people, we must care about our mission, care about the ones that we serve, and care about this country. And that's what HUD is, and that's what we have returned to do, sir. So the 2026 HUD budget request will allow us to operate at a standard of excellence that we have not in previous years and return the president's golden age. And I'm supportive of this and look forward to, Mr. Chairman, talking to you and your distinguished colleagues. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. There is at least one other committee meeting that's underway this morning that will carry some of our members away, including the ranking member of the full committee and the chairman of the full committee, who may or may not come in time here. If they do, I want to recognize them when they get here so that we can maximize their appearance.
Yes, sir.
But the Defense Subcommittee is meeting this morning with the Secretary of Defense and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs in order to get the posture hearing for that budget framework. And so now let's go to the Q&A portion of our meeting this morning. Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your commitment to reforming our federal rental assistance programs. The current system, as you've already articulated, is rife with inefficiency. The administration's request proposes placing the major HUD rental assistance programs, tenant-based, project-based, public housing, into a single state rental assistance block grant program that you referenced in your opening. This is a substantial change to business as usual. Now, as we consider this proposal, I want to make sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars while still meeting our obligation to help those most in need. I'd also note that an overhaul of these programs would need the work of the authorizing committee, that of financial services. I support reforms that promote work, that reduce dependency, and give state and local governments more control, but I want to ensure that we're not creating gaps that could lead to increased homelessness or hardship for vulnerable populations. So, Mr. Secretary, can you kind of walk us through the concept on how proposed block grant programs like this would maintain assistance to the approximate 10 million Americans currently served by these programs?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your question. As you stated, and I stated in my opening remarks, status quo is not good enough. And the way that we've been going about serving the American people from a HUD perspective is no longer good enough. And so with this new paradigm, it is indeed a paradigm shift, it's a culture shift. The goal here is not to serve less Americans. The goal here is to serve Americans better. And so to give states an opportunity to have skin in the game, to identify their unique needs, and then to be very deliberative about how they put the resources out as it pertains to rental assistance, as it pertains to taking care of the most vulnerable in their state. And there is a focus in this budget, Mr. Chairman, to take care of the elderly and those that are disabled. And when you look at HUD, HUD has had record funding over the past few years. In the last 8 years, HUD's budget went from $42 billion to $77 billion, and yet HUD lost focus of its most basic mission. We are only able currently to serve 1 out of 4 eligible families at HUD, and that's unacceptable when you have a $70 to $77 billion budget. And so this is a paradigm shift. Playing in the NFL and playing in sports, when you have a playbook and you're running plays that are not working, the best teams that I've seen are those that go in, they make adjustments, say, well, we can no longer run this play because it's causing us to lose. So let's run a new play. Let's reimagine what we're doing. I don't like to lose, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. I don't like to lose, and I don't like the American people to lose. And so we have to do something different in this country. It's not about just throwing money at situations. It's about what do we do with the money that we have to best serve effectively and efficiently the people of our country. And that's my mindset. That's my heart. It's not about the money for me. It's about the people. And we're returning HUD to that focus, mission-minded. We understand what our call is. We understand who we've been called to serve. And we understand the critical mission. And so at HUD currently, that's what we're focused on.
So when to use a football vernacular, when we break huddle on this block grant program, what conditions will be in place? What will you do to ensure that we have adequate service levels for, you mentioned the elderly, for the disabled, people that are very vulnerable in their lives? What assurances do we have? What can we do to ensure that there's a service level that is fitting for these individuals?
Thank you, sir. And that's a great question. So in this SRAP, State Rental Assistance Program, there is money in the budget from our PD&R program office at HUD to make sure that we work with states to implement an appropriate strategy, and also to work with you and your colleagues on this committee to make sure that this strategy is serving the most vulnerable in our country. HUD is a great facilitator of this, and we're very focused. And as you see in the budget, there's money set aside so that we don't just say there's a new program, but we can say this is how we're going to join in with states and join in with stakeholders to implement and execute this program. And so those conversations have begun and will continue, and we welcome your input, you and your colleagues' input, to make sure that this new strategy works effectively for the people we serve.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clyburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me, if I consider, I'm not going to do football. I played the game, not at the level you played it, but I'm a pretty good golfer. And I know that if I've got 150 yards to get to the green, it doesn't matter what club I use. What matters is what skill I've got. That's what matters. And I always hear people say, what club do you use? What does it mean to you? You ain't the same as I am. So therefore, at soon to be 85 years old, it's going to cost me a little more with a 6-iron that's going to cost this young man over here. So get the right equipment. Now, so if you tell me that HUD has been ineffective? Do you cure ineffectiveness by refocusing, or do you cure it by eliminating? So if you say, well, I've been ineffective, you eliminate the funds, how does that make HUD effective? Tell me about refocus.
Yes, sir. And I've heard that you are a great golfer. I do look forward to playing with you. Your 8-iron might be a different club than mine, but you're right, it is a skill. Mm-hmm. I'm reminded that during the previous administration, during COVID, with a $70 billion budget, sir, HUD hired 2,000 people during COVID, most of which stayed home. And there was continuous waste, fraud, and abuse. And so when you have that many people and still not carry out the job, and you have that much funding and still not carry out the job for the American people, then we have to refocus. And part of that refocus is take an inventory of staff, take an inventory of the budget, take an inventory where the budget is going. And currently in the programs we don't have a lot of purview, if you will, and transparency, if you will, where the money is going. Is it serving those it's supposed to be serving? And so part of this refocus is to bring that back to House and bring it to the stage to say, now let's have more transparency, let's have more accountability. And so when I look at refocus and I look at the skill set, all of that to me is in the same bucket. When you look at your people, mm-hmm. Are you doing the job you've been called to do? Are you doing at the level you've been called to do it? And is there transparency in the process that we have? And at HUD, that's what they're doing. And sir, I said it in my confirmation process that we're going to take inventory of every program office at HUD. We're going to maximize the budget that we do have. And we're going to serve the people that we're supposed to be serving. So the amount of people, the amount of money, that's not the deal here. Because with the tremendous amount of money and a tremendous amount of people, we haven't, prior to us getting here, carried out the job that we've been called to carry out.
I agree with you, but I think that to deal with COVID is a false. This is a false narrative here. I chaired the select subcommittee for the coronavirus. I know where the fraud was, and it wasn't in housing. The billions and billions and billions of fraudulent money went to some pretty wealthy people, at least one of whom is in this administration right now. So that's not the criteria that we ought to use here. Let's look at what the needs are and how we need to equip ourselves for these needs. Now, you mentioned the Obama-Biden administration. If you want to cue what you see to be the problem with the Obama-Biden administration, why would you advocate the Andrew Johnson and the Woodrow Wilson administrations? And I use those two administrations because I dislike them immensely, and they were Democrats. So I want you to think this is partisan. Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat, and I think one of the worst presidents we ever had. So this is not partisan here. This is whether or not we're going to have a program to meet the needs of the American people, or whether we're going to just get rid of it, throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that's what you seem to be doing here. Half of the budget, and then you tell me you want to refocus the agency with what? With what equipment? The 5-iron, or you will leave it in the bag?
Well, I think it's the right equipment for the situation. And right now, prior to us being here, we haven't been using the right equipment for the right situation.
So what is the right equipment?
Well, the right equipment, sir, is called transparency. It's called inventory. It's called, let's refocus and let's have a new paradigm. And, you talk about the Biden-Obama administration, and I make note to them just because that's what, yes, sir, because that's where the rule came, not politics. And so, sir, I will assure you that my heart and my focus is on serving the American people, and we are refocusing in order to do that appropriately. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'll get back, Mr. Chairman.
You'll get a mulligan here in another little while when we do a second round.
I look forward to it.
How's that?
Thank you.
Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Mr. Secretary, we're facing historic shortages of affordable housing. And I thought one of the best programs that HUD had was the SHOP program, where nonprofits would actually assist people in home ownership. And I can tell you, as a former sheriff, everywhere in my community, and we did this on purpose in Jacksonville, Florida, we went into the most challenged neighborhoods working with these nonprofit groups who would then bring home ownership into these areas, these most challenged public safety areas. And everywhere that home ownership went up, violent crime went down. And so that's why I love this SHOP program, because it puts people into home ownership. I like SRAP, but I really want people to own homes, and because I know it changes the whole community. So can you tell me a little bit about, how are we going to address this issue if we're doing away with SHOP?
Thank you, Sheriff. I really appreciate. Sorry, Congressman. And thank you for your service to law enforcement. Again, I reiterate, this is a new way of looking at how we distribute funds. And by bringing in the states and bringing in localities and giving them the flexibility to identify programs such as you stated that have been successful, then they'll have the ability to continue to fund and work with those programs. I too am for workforce. I too am for skills training and home ownership, moving from rent to home ownership, moving from being subsidized to now living a life of self-sufficiency. And that's the heart here.
So if I could interrupt. So you have SRAP, which is going to be basically a block grant for rental assistance programs. And you're saying there's going to be another block grant process where programs like SHOP can be funded out of if the state or the city decides that's how they want to use those funds?
No, sir, not an additional block grant, but included with.
Included in the SRAP?
Yes, include. When I say this, meaning that the states will have the authority and the flexibility to identify programs that are doing well and be able to not just fund those, but support those opportunities in the states that you're talking about, in particular like SHOP that you mentioned.
Yeah, but all of those others are rental assistance
They are.
programs.
Yes, sir.
But you're saying that those dollars will also be used for home ownership, affordable home ownership?
No, sir. What I'm saying is that when you have programs that promote home ownership, when you have programs that promote individuals being able to buy homes, states will now be able to identify those better than the federal government. The federal government is not the one that identifies those unique needs like states. And so the whole paradigm is to return that back to the states as it pertains to rental assistance that we talked about. And so this is a refocusing of taking the federal government out of it and putting the states in charge and the control of how they want to distribute the funds.
Okay. Let me ask one more question in this round. We in Jacksonville, we had a project-based rental assistance program, Eureka Gardens. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but this is dealing with public housing units and basic safety and quality standards, and how those complaints and inspections are handled. What sort of oversight do you see HUD having for those rental facilities? This one got so bad that we actually had an explosion, and I mean it was horrible. How do we improve the inspector training and accountability to make sure those inspections are consistent and reliable across the board?
Yes, sir. And HUD will still be involved, obviously, when it comes to inspections such as this. I've traveled around the country and visited public housing authorities and seen some of the conditions that people are living in across our country, and some of them are deplorable. And so obviously HUD will continue to be involved in such so that those public housing authorities are safe, that they are secure for the residents that are living there.
So even with the block grant, you're still going to be in the inspection business?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I see my time's up. I yield back.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I don't know if you really believe all this stuff or you're just parroting what you're told to say, because let me begin. I wrote reports on this that were detailed about how to streamline and consolidate government, make it more effective. Not because I hate it, because it's so important and the resources are scarce. But there's absolutely no details. So when you just say refocus and reform, it falls on deaf ears. It doesn't mean anything. You can talk about compassion, but no reform measures are going to be able to allow us to cut HUD by 50% and not have our most vulnerable people, seniors, kids, people with HIV/AIDS on the street. And Mr. Secretary, you have to understand housing is everything. Housing for people with HOPWA is health care. These people will die. There's no way you can believe that a 50% cut won't mean a dramatic increase in people being put on the street. So just, you can say what you want, but it's when you cut the programs like PRO, which is designed to remove regulations, something you seem to be focused on, that are stopping localities from building more housing. It's just, it defies credibility. So if you just want to say, we got to cut these things because that's our plan, I'd respect you a lot more than telling us that you care about people as you put them on the street. So let's just talk about HOPWA for a second. It zeroes out HOPWA and says they currently can receive emergency short-term and medium-term assistance through emergency grants program. But 64% of the people on HOPWA are not short-term folks. 2 years isn't enough for them. And the Emergency Solutions Grant, which is going to solve all the problems, is now supposed to absorb 7 existing programs, including this, and a cut of $532 million. I don't know if you've known anybody who died from HIV/AIDS. I have, so it's personal for people in my district and myself. So what's the detailed plan that says those folks aren't going to go on the street, where they won't get their medication and they'll die?
Thank you, sir. And I will say, sir, I'm not just speaking. I do actually care, and I do actually believe in what I'm saying. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't say it. You know, as a Christian, as a pastor, I care about all people. And when you talk about HOPWA and you talk about the Emergency Solutions Grant, you know, this will help us to better serve people in the community. This will help us to more effectively and efficiently serve people in the community.
How?
HUD had record funding. 770,000 people were homeless in January of 2024 in the point-in-time report. On one single night, January 2024, 770,000 people were homeless. And so when I say refocus, I really mean to refocus, because that's unacceptable. When you have record funding and yet you have almost 800,000 people on the streets, why would we continue to do the same thing that we've been doing and it's not working appropriately?
So your alternative is, besides just saying we're going to refocus, you're going to find a place for these folks to stay overnight. Okay, let's just talk as Christians. There's something about the story of the Bible and Christ having not a place to stay, right? So that's on your mind. Faith without acts is dead.
That's right.
What's your detail?
Yeah,
besides saying that you have, your faith won't put a house over their head.
Yes, sir. Faith, what I was going to say, faith without action is dead. And this is the action that we're going to take.
What?
To do it better.
How?
Because what we've been doing is not working. And I believe
What's
that,
plan B?
I believe that you all, your committee, we should have been asking what and how way before today.
I wrote
Because-
those reports. I'm with
Yeah.
you if you have details in
Yes, sir.
how, but all you're doing is cutting, and there's not even a transition period.
So we're going to be more effective and more efficient.
How?
We're not just cutting. It's a new paradigm.
How?
It's a new way to do things.
Let's
Working
come up
the
with more
states.
words than compassion and paradigm. detailed plans where these folks are going to
Yes, sir.
stay in the meantime.
And we look forward to working with you and this staff on those strategies. And I commit to that. It's not just words.
Thank you, Mr.
We'll be happy to work with you, sir, if you're willing to work with us.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley.
Okay.
Before I recognize Mr. Gonzalez, who's our next questioner, I'm going to be stepping aside from the gavel here for the remainder of this hearing so that I can get to the Defense Subcommittee and ask some appropriate questions there. I will be yielding the gavel to Ms. Bice here after this line of questioning. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Secretary, for your service to our great country. I'm a military veteran. I served 20 years in the military. Chairman Womack's a veteran. Secretary Zinke's a veteran. My question is on homeless veterans, my first question. One of the issues I care deeply about is homeless veterans. Back in 2024, HUD identified that on any given night, there are more than 32,000 homeless veterans. That's 32,000 too many. This issue hits close to home in my district in rural parts like Alpine and Van Horn, where there's little to no affordable housing supply, and in urban areas like San Antonio and El Paso, the housing availability for homeless veterans through HUD is often substandard or inadequate. Secretary Turner, would you be willing to visit my district so we can work together on this issue and find solutions to address the challenges facing both rural and urban homeless veterans?
Yes, sir, Congressman Gonzalez. Thank you. It's great to meet you. I do commit to visiting you in your district to come up with these viable solutions, and also working with my colleague, Secretary Collins, as it pertains to veterans and veterans homelessness.
Thank you for that. My next will be a comment on the community development block grants. The community development block grants have been a vital tool in my district, especially in the colonias. I mean, these are communities that don't have running water. It's absolutely atrocious, the conditions they're in. They're in predominantly rural, unincorporated communities that often lack less than basic infrastructure like running water, waste system, electricity, and paved roads. But I'd also urge the HUD to take a serious look at preserving this program or making sure that it just isn't completely removed. With the right safeguards in place, I believe we got to find the waste and the abuse. And I love the idea of how do you change it, right? If it's not working, how do you fix it? So to that, continuing to find critical infrastructure improvements in this community through that program, I think is important. My next question is on foster youth. One of the things I was encouraged to see in HUD's budget request was the inclusion of $25 million for foster youth to independence grants. As a member of the Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth, I recognize how critical these programs are for helping youth transition out of the foster care system. Last year, I passed a bill in the House, Find and Protect Your Foster Act, so that clearly it's important. My question is this: is HUD actively helping to track the number of foster youth who experience homelessness, and what steps is HUD taking to ensure vulnerable populations don't fall through these cracks?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Congressman. And we too are glad and excited that we have money in the budget to make sure that our youth that are aging out of foster care have a solid ground to land on. As we know that being in foster care is very difficult for our youth. And when I was in the House of Representatives sitting on the committee dealing with foster care and our youth in foster care, so I too have a heart for this, and so happy to be working with the First Lady and her team and you and your team on how we help from a HUD perspective these youth that are aging out of foster care to make sure that they have safe and sustainable places to stay and get on a good trajectory for their lives.
I appreciate you making a priority, and I look forward. Once again, I like the idea of, hey, how do we reimagine things? And I think that this is a positive part of that reimagination. Very personal to me. My wife was a foster child, and so I want to make sure that we work together to see that program get off the ground and grow and be productive. My last question is on law enforcement housing. I represent nearly half of the overall southern border, places like Eagle Pass, Del Rio, El Paso. My district has been ground zero for this border crisis, and as a result, we've seen a large surge of law enforcement personnel from CBP, National Guard deployed to this area. But in many cases, these are small rural communities, and there's simply not enough housing supply to meet the need. Out in West Texas, for example, I've been fighting to secure housing for first responders. My question is this: given the president's commitment to supporting first responders, What is HUD doing to ensure that first responders and those that are deployed to these areas have affordable and adequate housing?
Yes, sir, Congressman, and thank you for that. You know, I too have a heart, and it's top priority of our first responders and all Americans to make sure that they have affordable, sustainable places to stay. And obviously, you know, we have our FHA program, and the president too is a priority of his. And so we look forward to working with you and your colleagues and your staff on how we can ensure and help our first responders as they too look for housing to purchase and rent in your district and
Thank you
around
for
the
that.
country.
Thank you for that, because as we surge these people to these areas, there's just no housing, and that has been one of the takebacks. You can't just put pieces on a board. That you got to drill down a little bit. So thank you again for your testimony. I look forward to working with you. And Chairwoman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Next up, we have Ms. Watson-Coleman. You have 5 minutes, Ms. Coleman.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. You've said a lot today. You've not answered one question, but you're consistent. You've not answered the hows of the questions that the Republicans have asked, and you certainly haven't answered how you're going to make something happen on this side either. What I am concerned about is how you could even open your mouth and say that you care about this population or these populations when you're willing to come here and advocate for a 51% reduction in the budget. And so I want to go over a little bit of this stuff with you because I don't think you're refocusing. I think you're devastating. And this is a ludicrous proposal. I'm sure you know that 74% of Americans are concerned about housing and 771,000, you mentioned it, are currently homeless. I know you know that 7.6 million, including 2.9 million children, are facing the threat of eviction. I know that this budget does not usher us into any alleged golden age, but perhaps a gilded age. I am unsure how you and this administration arrived at the decision to cut HUD by 51%, specifically $45.6 billion during a period of rising homelessness and housing insecurity. And I want to remind you that 4 years ago, you were here. You and the administration are going to try to sell the American people a story that these cuts are justified, and you give it while you want to give your money back to very wealthy donors. It's my job to show the American people that these are unjustifiable cuts, and so here, let us go with this. A 40% cut to rental and homeless assistance programs totaling $27.25 billion. A $53 billion cut to Section 8 rental assistance. An $8.8 billion cut to public housing. A $1.2 billion cut to Sections 202 and 811 programs for the elderly and disabled. A $505 million cut to HOPWA. A $22 billion cut to HUD's housing construction supply and preservation program. A $1.25 billion cut to the home program. You care about home ownership? I don't think so. A $75 billion cut to the Choice Neighborhoods program. A $12 million cut to the SHOP program. A $6 million cut to rural capacity building grants. A $10 million cut to the PRICE program. A $296 million cut to the lead hazard reduction and healthy home programs grant. A $3.3 billion cut to community development block grants, a $100 million cut to pro-housing, a $196 million cut to family self-sufficiency programs, a $58 million cut to housing counseling, a $101.4 million cut to fair housing. Now, Secretary, I'm sure you know that these cuts will successfully increase housing instability, and evictions. I'm sure you know that those facing evictions don't have a right to counsel. I am sure you also know that your budget is making massive cuts to legal aid for those facing evictions and homelessness. So I'm sure you know that cutting rental assistance, eliminating fair housing protections, and defunding legal aid will not reduce homelessness and eviction in this country. I am sure you're aware that you are worsening the housing crisis with your budget proposal. If you really believe that you would not slash your agency's budget by over 50%. And by the way, You talk about giving the authority back to the states. You want to give them authority, but you don't want to give them resources. You can't do anything with your rhetoric and your narrative. You got to show with your actions and with your resources. And last but not least, I want you to tell me what DEI contracts you have terminated. What does that mean? Did you terminate contracts to veterans? Did you terminate contracts to disability organizations? Did you terminate contracts to Black contractors? Did you terminate to Latino or Asian or whatever? What the heck are you talking about eliminating DEI contracts in HUD? Who's your population? Who should you be looking after? It is shameful, and you are to be ashamed of being here. You don't have to answer any question because you haven't answered one yet.
Ms. Vice Chairman, I would actually like to answer her.
I yield back. I don't need you.
Okay, thank you, Congress Lady. You know, and thank you for stating all the stats of our budget. We really appreciate that because it just reiterates my point that with record funding, HUD has still not carried out its most basic mission. And I have
Don't
answered
act like
questions.
you haven't been here, sir. Just 4 years ago, you were here.
Ms.
Don't
Watson,
act
Ms.
like
Watson
you
Coleman,
care
if
about
you'll let
this
him, Ms.
population.
Watson Coleman, if you'll let him answer the question,
I
your
don't
time
need.
has
I
expired.
listen. I reclaimed my time back. I yielded my time. You wouldn't let him waste your time. You let him.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Ms. Watson Coleman. Thank you for reiterating my point that status quo is not good enough. That also homelessness has gone up in spite of record funding. And
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If we could move on.
Oh, sure.
The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong, is recognized for 5 minutes.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bice and Ranking Member Clyburn for holding this hearing today, and to our hardworking subcommittee staff. Secretary Turner, thank you for joining us today. During my 26 years on the Madison County Commission, the second largest county in the state of Alabama, I became extremely familiar with the benefits and bureaucratic burdens of HUD dollars. Something I hear consistently from local communities in North Alabama is that HUD's regulatory burdens are, often delay projects. Some projects are delayed to the point where they are penalized for not spending funds they couldn't access due to HUD's review timelines. Secretary Turner, how are you working with local communities to ensure that HUD acts as a partner, not a barrier, in project delivery?
And thank you, Congressman Strong. Appreciate your service, sir. You know, we have a tremendous staff at HUD that is very communicative and open, has open lines of communication with constituencies around the country to make sure that we are being efficient and effective as it pertains to getting resources out of the door. And working with yourself, your staff, and this committee is a goal that I commit to continue doing, to making sure the resources are going out, sir, in an effective and efficient manner. And as we have taken inventory, and as you alluded to take down the burdensome and the bureaucracy and the red tape is a goal of ours to make sure that we're serving the American people properly.
What is your plan to streamline permitting, review, and compliance processes to prevent these punishing penalties for federal inefficiencies?
Sir, so right now, you know, we have a tremendous CFO team, and our CFO, Irv Dennis, is second to none in our country, and he and his team are putting in financial controls to make sure that we are streamlining properly as it pertains to the question that you asked, and all of the processes that we have at HUD working with our constituents around America.
Next, I'd like to discuss the accountability and flexibility with HUD grant programs. Local communities, including the growing mid-sized urban centers found in North Alabama, often have the most accurate understanding of their unique housing and development needs. The administration's budget proposal to consolidate multiple housing programs into block grants, such as the State Rental Assistance Program, appear to be a bold step forward in increasing efficiency and allowing states greater flexibility in addressing their unique housing needs. Secretary Turner, could you elaborate on how these consolidations will help local communities to better allocate resources and reduce administrative burdens, ultimately leading to more effective outcomes for low and moderate income Americans.
Yes, sir. And so as you alluded to, the streamline and the effectiveness, putting the resources back to the states will allow them to not only identify their unique needs, but also to be very deliberative and precise in how they distribute those funds around their state and in their localities. And so I'm looking forward to this new strategy to put it back in the state's hands, while HUD obviously is a great convener and facilitator, but to give the states that flexibility, I believe will help us to operate more efficiently and serve people better than we have in the past.
Thank you. How are you implementing performance-based criteria that reward communities that responsibly leverage federal funding?
Sir, and that's a good conversation that we're having, an ongoing conversation that we're having right now, and we would welcome your ideas to how we can better do this from a performance base. I know at HUD, internally, we have a great performance-based strategy to where we make sure that people inside of HUD are performing the way that the American people have called us and expect us to perform. But, sir, I welcome your ideas as it pertains to that strategy.
Thank you. Chairwoman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Torres, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Secretary Turner, I represent California's 35th Congressional District, a region that was severely hit by flooding and the recent Los Angeles wildfires. They have had a devastating impact, not just on my community, but the entire region. These fires displaced thousands of people, destroying homes and devastated critical infrastructure. Yet, the administration's budget for fiscal year 26 proposes zero funding for the Community Development Block Grant CDBG money, and HUD has not requested CDBG disaster recovery funds to help California specifically and other disaster-stricken states. Mr. Secretary, when will HUD, submit a request for disaster assistance to support recovery efforts in California?
Thank you, madam. As you know, California has received disaster recovery funds. I myself was in LA a couple of months ago to visit families there and constituents there on the ground as it pertains to the wildfires.
California, sir, has not received a single penny in recovery funds for the recent wildfires. California is still owed $6 billion for wildfires and flooding that occurred last year. Do you believe that state and local governments already stretched thin can fill the massive gap alone?
You know, what I do know, ma'am, is that there has been a stewardship issue in California as it pertains to taxpayer dollars. And as I was there meeting with local authorities and leadership there, that's a point that I raised, is that what are you doing with the resources that you do have? Because the people of California are not being served properly. And so to throw more money, if I may, ma'am, to throw more money at a situation when the money that has been sent has not been stewarded well is something I believe that we need to take
So I'm going to
inventory
reclaim my
of.
time because you are talking about wasting federal dollars, but yet you're coming from an administration that seems to only care about the top 1%. Let me tell you, the federal minimum wage, in case you don't know, is $7.25. Can you tell me where in the U.S. can someone making those wages rent a one-bedroom apartment? Let me tell you, nowhere. Right now, families who lost their homes in wildfires are struggling trying to find a place to live. And the federal government has a responsibility, you have a responsibility, to return our federal dollars back to California to help communities in desperate need. But here's what makes it even more unconscionable, that you are sitting here while California sends $83 billion more in federal taxes than we receive back. We're literally funding your salary as well as housing programs in other states while our own veterans sleep on the streets, sir. I fully support disaster aid requests for California and for other states. The people rebuilding after a disaster deserve better than to be ignored and to have egos speaking words that mean nothing. What we need is actual actions. We need funding to ensure that we are able to provide the housing that we need.
Thank you, ma'am. And I would say again, and I reiterate, it's a stewardship issue. It's not a funding issue.
You have no proof of stewardship issues. All you have been doing is talking around and stroking your ego, sir. Right here, we need dollars and cents, and we need programs that actually are going to house our veterans and our homeless population. What you are doing with the cuts that you are demanding in this budget is you are destroying every single opportunity that we have built up, not just in my community, for people that have been severely addicted to narcotics, people recovering from those addictions, from illnesses, veterans in the street. That, by the way, under the Obama administration, we managed to have 0 homeless people in San Bernardino County living in the streets, okay? So don't come to me and tell me that it is an issue of not having accountability.
Ma'am, did
The
you know homelessness was
accountability-
up 16% in
The accountability
California?
lies in this most corrupt
And we just
administration
closed
that we
two,
have had.
Madam Vice Chair, we just had to close 2
My time has
field
expired, and I
offices.
yield back to the chair.
We just had to close 2 field offices
The
in
the gentlelady
California
yields her
due to the
time.
unrest going on in California. And so I say it's time for a paradigm shift.
The gentlelady has yielded her time back. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Siscomani, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Vice, and thank you, Secretary Turner, for being here today. Really appreciate that. I want to first like to ask about an issue that is top priority for me as a member of both this committee, but also the Veteran Affairs Committee, and that's veterans homelessness. It's been brought up a couple of times, and I want to piggyback off what my colleague Tony Gonzalez was talking about on that issue when he brought it up. But mine's a little more specific. As you know, the HUD VASH program is a collaborative initiative between HUD and the VA that aims to end homelessness among veterans. While the HUD VASH program has made meaningful progress in reducing veteran homelessness, challenges like voucher, underutilization, and case manager storages persist still. So what steps is HUD taking to ensure veterans not only receive vouchers, but can successfully use them to secure permanent housing with the wraparound service that they need?
Thank you, Congressman. Nice to meet you, sir. Again, working with my colleague, Secretary Collins from the VA, we just met a couple weeks ago, and this is of top priority for us, our veterans in our country, as it pertains to homelessness and housing, and also to be able to have the states working closely with us to prioritize veterans, I believe is a great strategy going forward. And sir, we look forward to working with you and Representative Gonzalez to have ideas and strategies to bring to the table where we can best serve our veterans.
What are some examples you would say that will be good to that maybe HUD hasn't been doing so far on the voucher system because it's being underutilized, and we want to make sure that they have access to that? Is it awareness? Is it outreach? How can we get that information to our veterans? I represent about 80,000 veterans in my district. In terms of congressional districts, it ranks about 9 of the most populated areas for veterans, DM Air Force Base, Fort Huachuca, and Sierra Vista. So I have a large veteran population. I want to make sure that they have the access is there, but the ability to get it, and that we're being proactive on reaching out to them with that.
Yes, sir. I believe awareness and outreach, and also to take the bureaucracy out of the program and process, to take down the red tape, to make sure that we're serving our veterans in the manner that we're supposed to be serving. So I agree, awareness, outreach, and taking down the burdensome regulations and red tape to make sure we prioritize our veterans.
A lot of red tape to tackle, that's for sure. I've got one more question that I want to fit in here. I'd like to thank you for mentioning in your testimony that HUD will begin to partner with faith-based organizations. I'll also like to highlight a highly effective organization in my district, the Gospel Rescue Mission. The Gospel Rescue Mission's Center for Opportunity is one of the most effective homelessness providers in Arizona, offering not only shelter for homeless individuals, but also substance abuse services, faith-based consulting, employment training and placement, and much more. They even have a mobile cafe where their program participants are able to gain on-the-job training. Since 2019, they have helped 542 people make a full recovery from addiction, 2,356 people obtain permanent stable housing, assisted 1,960 people with finding a job, and have provided over 1 million meals for those in need, all without a single dollar from the government. They can tell us exactly what their ratio of success is. They know where their dollars are going. They know exactly what's going on without a single dollar from the government. Can you please elaborate more on how HUD will work to support faith-based providers such as the Gospel Rescue Mission? And what role do you see faith-based providers playing in HUD's mission moving forward?
Thank you, sir. And you're exactly right. You know, the Gospel Rescue Mission, Union Rescue Mission in LA, the Dream Center in LA, and other faith-based and nonprofit organizations are the ones that are actually doing the work on the ground with data-driven results. And so historically, it's been hard for faith-based organizations to work with the government, but they are some of our best partners. And so we want to make sure that we ensure that these partnerships are thriving around our country, because they're the ones that are actually doing the work. And so HUD has prioritized this in these public-private partnerships and working with faith-based institutions, because they are the ones that are actually doing the work. And so that's a priority of mine. It's a priority of our team. And we look forward to working with you, sir, on that.
Thank you. And they don't just say they're doing the work, their data proves it. Again, they can go to the numbers. I've asked many through these hearings about specific information on success of programs, data-driven results, and the government often is not able to give those specific numbers and data points like these organizations are. The federal government has spent $36.6 billion to end homelessness, and the number of homeless people has only skyrocketed. So that issue is not being solved by just throwing money at the problem. We need to show accountability here, and the way that these programs and these nonprofits have done it in faith-based is a great way and example to do that. So I really encourage you to look into that and keep on partnering with them.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Espaillat, is recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Espaillat, your mic, I think.
I think it's on now. Secretary, I want to ask you some basic questions. Do you consider that there is a homelessness crisis in America?
Yes, sir.
Do you think that there is a housing affordability emergency in America?
I do.
Mr. Secretary, is the rent too damn high in Washington, D.C.?
I believe it's high in a lot of places, sir.
So there is a homelessness crisis. There is an affordable housing emergency, and the rent is too damn high in many places across America. And so what does HUD do? What does this administration propose? A 51% cut on basic services for housing. Now, building housing is not a cheap endeavor. It's a deep pocket challenge anywhere in America. It's not cheap to build housing. It costs money. And so you're cutting 51% of the budget while you recognize that there is a homelessness crisis, there's an affordable housing emergency, and the rent is too damn high in America. Now, I represent a district that has probably the biggest concentration of NYCHA apartments. That's the New York City Housing Authority apartments in the city. Now, there's 570,000 people live in the city of New York under NYCHA. Now, you were born in Richardson, Texas. That town has 119,000 people. So NYCHA is 5 times the size of the city that you were born in. And they have a $78 billion deficit, a deep hole for capital needs, boilers, roof work, pointing work, faulty elevators, flooding, mold in the apartments, lead paint in the apartment. These are the conditions in NYCHA, $78 billion hole for capital needs, and you're cutting the budget 51%. Now, I know that you're familiar.
Sir, can I add some? Can I add some?
I'll ask you a question in
Okay,
a
cool.
minute.
Thank you.
I know that you're familiar with some football terms. You said so in your testimony. So I'm going to just highlight some of the cuts. $27.2 billion, or 40% cut to rental and homeless assistance program. To me, that sounds like roughing the passer. A $2.2 billion, or 71% cut to housing construction, supply, and preservation. That sounds to me like past interference. A $3.4 billion, or 100% cut to economic development programs. To me, that sounds very much like a delay of game. A $254 million, or 100% cut to self-sufficiency and pathways to home ownership programs. That seems that is a false start. Mr. Secretary, you have engaged in personal foul on the American people. These cuts are severe, and they're going to exacerbate the homeless crisis. They're going to further throw into crisis the affordable housing emergency, and the rent is going to continue to be too damn high. You're cutting 51% of the budget. Housing is an expensive endeavor. It's no longer a cheap endeavor anywhere in America, anywhere in the world. It's a deep pocket issue, and people are sleeping on the street, and you're doing these cuts so that you can give money to people that sleep in mansions, that sleep in Fifth Avenue multi-million-dollar condos, that have lakeside houses and beachfront properties. That's what you're doing. You're not doing God's work. That's not God's work. 51% cut. That's devastating. That's a personal foul, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, and I yield back. I reclaim my time.
The referee may have to call a timeout moving forward.
Ma'am, can I answer? Can I answer this?
The gentleman has yielded his time. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Joyce, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm sorry, I was at another hearing, but I'm trying to, like the chairman, trying to work between two of them. Secretary Turner, I recognize the administration's efforts to make tough but thoughtful budget decisions aimed at promoting efficiency and accountability across federal programs. I also appreciate HUD's critical role in long-term disaster recovery and their partnership with other agencies in helping communities transition from emergency response to sustainable rebuilding. As you are aware, both FEMA and HUD specifically work in tandem to assist communities in recovering and rebuilding after natural disasters. FEMA by providing temporary housing, and HUD by facilitating the transition to permanent housing solutions. In light of the proposed changes to the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program in the FY 2026 budget, how does HUD plan to uphold its mission in this space, particularly as it relates to supporting disaster-affected families and communities? Further, could you share how HUD's plans to maintain its critical role in ensuring disaster survivors are successfully transitioned from costly temporary FEMA housing into more stable long-term housing solutions, even with the proposed reductions?
Yes, sir, and thank you, Congressman. Great to meet you. You know, HUD is very focused on our critical mission. We're very focused on disaster recovery. We're focused on housing. We're focused on homelessness, and that has not been lost on us. We understand that this is a different way of the distribution of the funds. This is a different paradigm that we're speaking about in the budget that the president and myself are proposing today. We will not allow disaster recovery and those that need assistance in disaster recovery to be lost on us, working with the states, working with our nonprofits, working with the faith-based organizations, and obviously, sir, you and your colleagues on the committee. It's not that it will be lost, it's just that it is a different way of distributing these funds. And sir, we believe that this will help us to more effectively and efficiently serve those that are in need in our country.
Thank you, sir. It was a great answer, but it didn't demonstrate a plan. Do you have
Yes,
a
sir.
plan?
Yes, and so in the budget, there is money in our budget to make sure that HUD works with states to develop these strategies and develop a plan. The conversations have begun, And so we do recognize that it is a new way of doing it. We are focused on making sure that the strategy is not just implemented, but executed in every state, and working with this committee and with states and stakeholders in those states. The money is in our budget to do so. And so that plan has begun and is forthcoming. And I look forward to your input and how we can best do this new strategy.
One thing I know is you're right. Disasters come all over the country. Disasters come, and you need to be ready for them. Secretary, the administration has highlighted the underutilized lands as one of the strategies to deliver on the promise of more affordable housing, including ongoing coordination between HUD and the Department of the Interior under Secretary Burgum's leadership. Can you provide an update on how this interagency effort is being implemented and what outcomes HUD anticipates in terms of expanding access to affordable housing?
Yes, sir. So Secretary Burgum and I, we signed an MOU, as you have stated, to create a joint task force to identify underutilized federal lands around our country. The Department of Interior has about 500 million acres that are available to be used to build affordable housing, workforce housing, all types of housing around our country. And so HUD's priority in this is to identify where housing is needed. DOI, their priority is to identify the lands that can be used, and then work with local states and stakeholders to say what type of housing is needed in this particular area. And so Secretary Berger and I were in Nevada meeting with the governor and stakeholders there as it pertains to affordable housing in that state, and working with the leadership there with BLM and others. And so, sir, we are well underway on the task force. There's much work to be done, but the identification of the land and identification of the housing needs is underway. And so we look forward to working with states and localities on this strategy.
Can you elaborate where in your 26 budget request the department intends to leverage support for that effort, in particular as it relates to infrastructure, planning, or technical assistance needed to make these underutilized lands viable?
Yes, sir. And so that's where our joint partnership with DOI will come in from HUD's budget, obviously, and from DOI, but also technical assistance. HUD still has technical assistance where we can help with these development of housing and how we implement this around the country as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Stoloro, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just would like to follow up for 1 second with my colleague. This is the Appropriations Committee.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
deal in amounts of money. A program, what is the amount? What's it going to do? How is it going to accomplish that? So far, we can't seem to get any information about budget detail, about what it is that you all are doing. It's a lot of great words, but what are dollars and cents? So I think you just have to keep in mind that we appropriate money based on needs and what the programs are, and then we make a decision as to whether or not we ought to be doing that or not. So please, get us information on the plan, the dollar amount, what you plan to do. Listen, your budget request, quite honestly, unleashes a catastrophe of evictions, homelessness, at an unbelievable scale. 750,000 of Americans experience homelessness on any given night. Cost of housing is out of control. Middle-class families, working families are being suffocated. Folks in this country today work paycheck to paycheck. One emergency or layoff from financial ruin, yet your budget eliminates critical lifelines that help to keep a roof over most people's heads in this nation. Let me just say, with regard to a question here, we have Ansonia, Connecticut, which I represent. Housing Authority is smaller, public housing authority. They want to expand programs, services, especially for seniors. Residents have lived in this Naugatuck Valley their whole lives. They don't have income to sustain their homes, but they lack affordable housing options. Based on recent national data, it's becoming clear that homelessness among seniors is rising. Some experts expect the trend will continue. People over age 50 used to make up 10% of the homeless population. Now it's close to half. A particularly vulnerable population with its own set of challenges. Over 2 million seniors rely on federal rental assistance to age in place. You are cutting HUD rental assistance by 43%. You propose to eliminate dedicated Section 202 housing for the elderly program, pushing more responsibility to states. Everyone on this committee knows the states don't have the wherewithal to be able to do this. There's no assessment of whether or not they have the capacity to manage. You propose completely upending homelessness programs. You shifting to short and medium-term assistance with no funding for the type of permanent supportive housing that chronically homeless people with age-related infirmities need to achieve. We have a program in my district in Connecticut. It's a senior housing program called The Towers, and you have frozen their grant and not giving them the opportunity to deal with critical renovations to a 55-year-old building. Given housing affordability, homelessness crisis facing our seniors who already live on a fixed income, how are you justifying eliminating dedicated programs that support housing developments with on-site supportive services tailored to seniors' needs?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Dolores. So great to meet you, ma'am. And as I said in my opening statement, with this new budget proposal under the president's leadership, this will help us to more effectively serve the most vulnerable.
How?
Effectively serve
How?
elderly and
Answer
disabled.
my question.
Yes,
How?
ma'am.
What is the way in which you are going to deal and justify eliminating dedicated programs that support on-site supportive services tailored to seniors' needs? How are you doing that?
Working with the states, ma'am. And when I say working with the states, if I may, states understand their unique needs as it pertains to the elderly, as it
What
pertains
is the
to
program
disabled,
that will address
as it
that? What is the
pertains
amount of
to
money
the most
that is
vulnerable.
going to be required to do this? What portion of it will be federal? What portion will be state? What is the program?
Well, as you said, ma'am, you all are appropriators. You control the purse strings. My job is to maximize the budget that you do give me. And with maximize this budget, we will work with the states to identify, if you will, ma'am,
You
where
can't
those
have a
needs
budget,
are.
with all due respect, you
do.
cannot
Thank
have
you,
a
ma'am.
budget that doesn't have any numbers, that doesn't have any programmatic direction.
Ma'am, you have the
That doesn't
budget
tell
in
us
front
what
of
we're
you.
doing. But what is the specific program on seniors? What are you doing? You're eliminating elderly housing, Section 202, which has been in place for years. I worked for a city many years ago, and it was Section 202 in which we worked with providers to do this. You know, my time has run out, but zero programmatic information, zero details on the budget.
Ma'am, status
Ranking
quo
member.
is
I would
done.
like to ask unanimous
We'll do it
consent
a
to put
different
my
way.
opening statement into the record because I couldn't be here for
Without
these.
objection.
Thank you.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, first let me start out by saying there is a famous quote that I think all of us here know well, and that is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different outcome. And based on your opening statement, you are looking to do something different. You are looking to try to find a different path to make sure that we're addressing homelessness in our country. Mr. Secretary, when were you confirmed?
February the 5th.
So we're talking about 120 plus days ago, is that correct?
Yes.
Is it safe to say that you have a framework for a plan that you want to move forward, but maybe not all of the nuts and bolts that you need to be able to present that those details
Indeed,
today?
the framework is there. We're working on the nuts and bolts. Yes, ma'am.
I want to give you the opportunity to address some of the concerns that have been raised here today, but I also want to bring up one other point, and that is I was surprised to find out that there are approximately 3,000 public housing authorities across the country. Do you feel like that those housing authorities are working efficiently for HUD?
No, ma'am. And we do have over 3,000 public housing authorities around our country, many of which are not operating appropriately. Some are. I've traveled extensively in just 120 days that I've been in this assignment around our country and visited public housing authorities. I was just at NYCHA to address the congressman who was asking me about NYCHA. NYCHA is $200 million in arrears, And that's with a $2.3 billion appropriation from the appropriators, $2.3 billion in fiscal year 24, and yet they're $200 million in arrears. They have 250,000 people on the waiting list. Just while I was there last Wednesday, a 21-year-old was shot in the neck and killed at a public barbecue, and no arrest has been made. So tell me, how are the residents there safe? They're living in deplorable conditions. It's not safe. The New York NYPD is not responding the way they should. And so that's just one example of a public housing authority not being efficient, but yet we want to continue the status quo. I'm not interested in doing business as usual. The president is not interested. And so the answer is, this is a new culture. It's a new paradigm. And another housing authority that I visit, the residents were even afraid to tell me what was going on in fear of repercussions by the board of directors there. There was one lady there that's been living there since 1973. That means she's been living there her entire life. Her mother, her, and now her children. 3 generational, multiple generations living in public housing authority. That's not what it's meant for. It's meant for temporary assistance, but then to be raised out of public assistance to a life of self-sustainability. And so, no, ma'am, public housing authorities as a whole are not operating efficiently.
The budget proposes changing 5 programs into a singular block grant program. It's been mentioned earlier, called the State Rental Assistance Program. How can we trust that states with governors, including Gavin Newsom, who spent $18.5 billion on affordable housing in the past year, or 42.5% of HUD's FY26 budget request, will use the block grant funding appropriately, because they clearly have not been successful in addressing the homelessness issue?
Yes, ma'am, and that's a great question. And it's what I think we should talk about, because, this is a new shift. And we have to work with the appropriate leaders in the appropriate states. And some states, as you know, ma'am, are better than others. Leadership in some states is greater than others. We see right now what's going on in LA, with the agitators and the riots and the attack on our law enforcement. And so, California is not a good example of proper leadership, but there are many around our country that do have proper leadership. And so I'm looking forward to working with them as they implement, the funding and distribute it appropriately to take care of the needs in their particular state.
Mr. Secretary, let me wrap up by saying, first of all, we appreciate you being here today. Homelessness is an issue. It's an issue across this country, and we want to make sure that your organization is addressing it in a thoughtful, responsible way. Certainly, you've heard today from members of this committee the concerns around foster children aging out of the system, veterans homelessness, which is something that I'm passionate about as a member of the MilCon VA subcommittee as well on appropriations. So we all look forward to working with you to make sure that we are using taxpayer dollars judiciously, wisely, but also trying to find solutions to the problems that we face as it relates to homelessness. With that, my time has now expired.
Madam Chairwoman,
and at this,
I know we're.
for what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
I really appreciate that. I thought we were going to have a second round. Just ask unanimous consent to submit for the record 4 pages of stories from women in Chicago who are currently using these vouchers to keep themselves and their children safe.
Without objection,
Thank you.
that'll be entered into the record. And with that, I would like to give the ranking member, Mr. Clyburn, the ability to offer a closing statement. Mr. Clyburn, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Mr. Secretary, I grew up in the Parsonage, and when I told my dad that I had decided against going to the seminary, he said to me, well, son, I suspect the world would much rather see a sermon than to hear one. I have never forgotten that. And I try to conduct myself here in such a way that people will see in my work a good, productive sermon. Now, I've listened to your testimony, and I've looked at some comments you've made in the past, especially as it relates to DEI. You said that DEI is inexcusable propaganda. Well, Mr. Secretary, I beg to differ. I grew up in South Carolina. I still live in South Carolina. My parents, all are South Carolinians, were South Carolinians. And what you propose today, though you've been using the word refocus means to change directions. What you've been testifying to is retrogression. It means to return to something of former, usually something that's worse. And Cutting 51% out of a budget will not refocus the budget. It will return to what that budget and those plans were when you had that 51% less. So I would say to you today that when you look at states' rights, I'm not going to be concerned about this if you give the right to South Carolina, because you're looking at the guy that wrote the South Carolina Fair Housing Law, and we implement that law. I ran it. The guy that wrote the South Carolina Bill of Rights for handicapped citizens. I was not in the I've never been in the state legislature. So I know how to manage stuff. That's all I've ever been. In the budget you are proposing, you cannot possibly meet the needs of the American people with that budget. We all talk about race and sex discrimination, but the big problem, if you look at all of the protected classes in housing, you know which one gets the most discrimination? The disabled. The disabled. And that is sinful for us to sit here and cut the budget for the disabled. I want to close with this. I represent North Charleston. According to the Princeton study, North Charleston led the nation in evictions. I represent Columbia, South Carolina, and I live in Columbia. Number 6 in evictions. There's something those two communities got in common that I want you to focus on. I want this committee to think about. Those two committees. Fort Jackson is in Columbia. The Charleston Air Force Base in North Charleston. The communities that house the most of our servicemen and women are leading the nation in evictions. During the coronavirus, I led the investigation into these evictions. Servicemen and women, people serving abroad while their children and spouses are back home, getting evicted. And here we are, cutting the money to address those needs. Mr. Secretary, I look forward to playing a round of golf with you so that we can really discuss this when we have more time. So I'll close.
Thank you.
With
Thank
a
you,
golf
sir.
story, if I may, Madam Vice Chair. I once read the story of a man who played a country club, and he came upon the hole, and there was a pond between him and the green, and he turned to his caddy. He said, "Caddy, what do the members of this club use when they are faced with this shot?" And the caddy said, "Well, most of them use a 6-iron from this spot." So he pulled out the 6-iron, addressed the ball, hit it perfectly in the water. The ball fell in the water. He turned to his caddy and said, "Caddy, I thought you said that most of the people playing from this point use a 6-iron. He said, "Most of them do." He said, "Well, I just hit the 6-iron about as sweet as I could hit it, and the ball is in the water." Most of them do. So we have to learn. We can't follow what most people do. What we have to do is size up the situation, think about your capabilities, and then address the ball. Use the right equipment, and we might get to the green. Don't do what most of them do. I'll get back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Clyburn.
you,
And we've had a lot of sports analogies today. We talked baseball, University of Arkansas. We talked football. We talked golf. We did not talk about Thunder basketball. So I feel obligated as the member from Oklahoma representing the Oklahoma City Thunder to give a plug to them. So, Mr. Secretary, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for this robust conversation. We look forward, as I mentioned, to working with you in the future to make sure that we are addressing the homeless population across this country. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.